Welcome to the Sportsman's Voice Roundup, your weekly look at conservation and sporting community news happening across the nation and on the Hill. Thanks for tuning in. This is the TSV Roundup. Welcome in, ladies and gentlemen, to this edition of the Sportsman's Voice Roundup for the week of April 7th, 2025. Our lead story for this week: put your money where your mouth is. The angling and boating community has been doing that for 75 years. That story comes to us from Chris Horton. Before we get into that, let's check out the other headlines. Attempt to abolish a 72-hour wait period on firearm transfers happening in Maine. Beaver ban. Oregon House Bill 3932 is a clear attack on trapping. Sunset on the horizon. Minnesota bill to continue crossbow inclusion during archery season passes committee. And the 2025 Georgia legislative session comes to a close, and a look back at that coming up here. All that and more. Before we get to our lead story, do want to recognize our supporters for this week's episode: Bass Pro Shops, Richard Childress Racing, the National Shooting Sports Foundation, NSSF. We thank them for their support and their partnership. With that, let us dive into this week's lead story, brought to us by Chris Horton. Regrettably cannot join us this week, but I will do my best to bring you his words and flavor for this one here. Why it matters, though relatively few people are familiar with the Federal Aid in Sport Fishing Restoration Act. 2025 marks the 75th anniversary of this important program and the greatest fish and aquatic resource conservation story ever told. Without it, there would be far fewer places to launch a boat, piers to fish from, or fish to catch. CSF is using this historical marker to educate members of Congress, state legislators, and the public on just how vital this user pays public benefits program is to the nation and our aquatic resources. 75, the number of years since the highly successful sport fish restoration program was established. 19.3 billion. That is the total of inflation adjusted revenue for a sport fishing restoration program that it has generated for state aquatic resources and boating efforts since its establishment. We cover Pittman Robinson quite a bit, almost weekly on this program, as well as Dingle Johnson, as it's commonly referred to. And what Chris's article here is highlighting is the success of that in its 75th year and its anniversary. And it bears repeating. The biggest part of this story is that these programs are not government down programs. That is, the government did not levy these taxes on its citizens. The sporting community 90 years ago, by way of Pittman Robinson, said, we want that manufacturer's level 10 to 11% tax assessed on firearms and ammunition. Because we got a way to self-feed. We have a way to fund this without a heavy-handed government bureaucracy coming down saying, you will do this. With the success of Pittman Robinson 75 years ago, they said, hey, we can do this in the sport fishing community. So since 1950, the Sport Fish Restoration Program has been the principal funding source for state fish hatcheries, fisheries management, boating access, recruiting and reactivating anglers and boaters, boater safety, and aquatic education programs. From 1951 to 2025, the revenues generated by the program for the states total an impressive, as I said before, $19.3 billion when adjusted for inflation. It's a program that is vital to providing Americans with healthy fisheries and easy access to our waters. The excise taxes through Pittman Robinson and Dingle Johnson, combined with fishing and hunting license revenues, constitutes the American system of conservation funding. And again, it's a model unlike anything else in the world. because we asked for it. Unfortunately, policymakers sometimes assume these funds come from general taxes on the public and are subject to appropriations or spending cuts, but they're not. Again, they are not. These funds are derived from those who hunt, fish, boat, and the industries they support for one purpose: to make sure we have access to healthy fish and wildlife resources. I'm pausing here for a minute because I don't want to be extra redundant and like keep repeating the same words. But it's vitally important that this point is driven home. And again, acknowledging that we talk about this almost every week. And even on the feature episode, inevitably it comes up because this is, and as acknowledged in the past, aside from the species specific restoration stories in the US, our funding mechanism, the American system of conservation funding, is the single most important story we can tell as a community. Not just to each other, even though that is vitally important that those of us that are doing this, are participants in it, understand how this system works. Our legislators, you folks that are listening, that are in the state houses, that are on Capitol Hill, have to understand how this works and that these aren't bloated, inflated programs that are fed from the masses, from the paychecks of those who get taxed week in and week out. No, these were programs that we, the community, asked for. Again, I'm saying it again, as a self-funding mechanism, so that we weren't reliant on the entirety of the population. So that these funds can be dedicated, can be specific in how they are allocated and how they're distributed and how they are used and what they are used for. These are not private piggy banks that are added to on a balance sheet by the entirety of the population. No, the consumers who purchase this stuff from the manufacturers, who again are paying these excise taxes at the manufacturer level, go into these dedicated funds again because we asked for it. These are not funds. These are not accounts to be pilfered or robbed or fund pet projects or as an alternate subsidy for some other pet project in your state or a federal program. No, they are dedicated for the very specific reasons of conservation, for wildlife conservation, for fisheries conservation, and the systems that support those conservation efforts. It is because of these federal match dollars that go into the states against their hunting and fishing licenses sales that we are able to, and the state agencies, Fish and Wildlife Service, are able to execute science-based wildlife management, fisheries management, and put that on the ground. Without it, we don't have it. We don't have the restoration of the wild turkey that was about extrapolated from the landscape in the first couple decades of the last century. You don't have the Rocky Mountain elk coming back in the numbers that it has recovered, and finding it in the East. Traditional home ranges. You probably don't have the explosion of white-tailed deer all over God's creation. In some places, they truly, shouldn't be and are a menace, and need that management. We don't have the recovery of non-game species or threatened species. Bald eagle, our national symbol, right? I mean, growing up, I barely ever saw bald eagles. I swear I can see a bald eagle probably every day if I went out every day. There are just so many now, and they're a very common sight. It's still very cool to see because when you grow up without them, it's like, wow, there they are. But young people, the alpha generation and whatever the heck came before it, Gen Z or whatever, these folks have grown up knowing vast populations of fish and game and really haven't experienced without it. It's a remarkable thing to see. In recognition of the 75th anniversary of the Federal Aid and Sport Fishing Restoration Act and the highly successful program it has become, as just illustrated. We at CSF are working with our state legislative sportsmen's caucuses to pass celebratory resolutions while educating federal legislators, state legislators, and government offices on the importance of this program. It's also timely as CSF and other members of the Angling and Boating Alliance will be working on the congressional reauthorization of the program next year in 2026. This user pay public benefit system of conservation funding is unique, incredibly effective, and worth protecting for the next 75 years and beyond. It is worth celebrating. And again, next year, when we look at 90 years of Pittman Robinson, that's worth celebrating. And then 10 years from that, when we're looking at a whole century of self-sustaining, self-funding wildlife management, conservation, true conservation in this country, that is definitely worth celebrating. Definitely worth the celebratory resolutions happening that have been introduced in all state capitals throughout the country and are currently going through their processes. And as those roll out, we look forward to bringing you um, those and acknowledging and appreciating the recognition of those legislative bodies, as well as our friends on the Hill. We won't stop beating this drum here. We get beyond these resolutions, it's still a story to tell. And until everyone gets it, and until people start understanding how it works and stop looking at those balance sheets thinking, "Oh, there's a pot of gold there at the end of this fishing game rainbow," or whatever the heck they see, and they think they can take it and divert it and fix something. Folks, you can't touch it. That's not how this works. And we're not asking you to fix it. We don't ask you to change it. It works very well. It's done so for 75 years here. It's done so for almost 90 years the other Pittman Robinson. So if it's not broken, don't fix it. And it clearly is not. It was the fix to a broken system that preceded it. We're doing just fine with it. And we look forward to celebrating, as Chris's article said, another 70 years of sport fish restoration, as well as Wildlife Restoration Act and PR in the years to come. Thank you, Chris, for your reporting. I'm sorry we missed you. He is busy doing the good work that he does. And no doubt you will hear from Chris in the very short future. Matter of fact, I believe probably next Thursday. So stand by for fan favorite Chris Horton. All right, moving on here. Let's go up to Maine. What we have here in Maine, the introduction of legislative docket LD 1230. This is a bill that is seeking to repeal in totality a bill that was passed last session, 2024, LD 2238, which was a bill that was hurriedly passed in an attempt to, doing the air finger quotes, folks, do something. And I'm not minimizing this, but it was an attempt to do something for politicians to feel good after a very tragic, horrific, and I think it is historically the worst casualty murder in Maine's history, where 18 people were murdered in Lewiston, Maine, and another 30 some odd, I think 32 folks were injured because of a person suffering from mental illnesses, major issues that were identified early on. So this was the solution. This was the feel good. We're gonna do something in Maine, and of that came 2238, which instituted a 72-hour waiting period on firearm transfers. After that passage in 2024, that 72-hour waiting period went immediately into effect. Our reporting on it at the time highlighted some of the bigger retailers in the state um, were looking at that. It's just a bad for business for them. And when you have large retailers looking to pick up their business, which isn't easy, but the fact that they were talking about it in the public and moving out of state to a more friendlier state and the only state it borders, that's problematic. To date, that hasn't been done. But fast forward to this February, where we have a hold on the measure by a federal judge, while this law has been challenged or is currently being challenged. A month later, in March, March 25th to be specific, our current bill, LD 1230, was introduced to fully repeal the law. Now, while most legislation tends to be introduced at the beginning of the legislative session, the legislative process in Augusta, if you're not from the region, you probably don't know, but it definitely has been on the national news. Uh, it's been pretty messy up there in Augusta, and even out of the gate with the extreme partisanship getting in the way of Maine's budget reconciliation, and further exacerbated when local and federal leaders end up locking horns over Title IX issues in the Pine Tree State. With the extreme political environment in Augusta and the legislator adjourning sine die on March 21st, way early, the legislative process has been complicated, disrupting the introduction of bills like 1230, which probably should have been done earlier. There's a huge backlog of legislation outside of our sporting issues that have gotten caught up in this. May now find itself in a special session of the legislature, still mired in toxic partisanship due to and that is to the detriment of Maine's sporting community. It's important to highlight the possession of a firearm is not only protected under the Second Amendment, but is also ingrained in our nation's cultural fabric. Sportsmen and women in Maine have been the forefront of offering improvements towards determining one's eligibility in purchasing a firearm. Yet, the 72-hour waiting period implemented last year was not a constructive route to take. They're implementing a delay on the transfer of a firearm. Last year's legislation created a unique biased hurdle on the hunting and sport shooting communities, a barrier levied against no other outdoor experience. Maine sportsmen and women are the backbone of the funding structure we just highlighted in Chris's article. The funding structure for conservation efforts that benefits fish, wildlife, and their habitat throughout the state, as well as the citizenry at large. The 72-hour waiting period on transferring of a firearm, now it's the minimum waiting period, is a slight to the many benefits provided by the sporting industry, to include recreational access to public and private lands, shooting ranges, and boat access facilities, wetland protection and its associated water filtration and flood reduction functions, and improved soil and water conservation, all of which benefit the public at large, not just sportsmen and women. I will bring you the updates as I work directly with our partners in the Maine Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus, who uh, I and CSF certainly look forward to working with to get this legislation over the finish line if we can, but fully recognizing it is not a clean process in Augusta this year. But like I say, we will bring you the updates as they warrant. More craziness. Let's go west for crazy because, we're good for that. A beaver ban, potential beaver ban. Oregon House Bill 3932 is a clear attack on trapping. And this from Marie Neumiller. Oregon House 3932 pushes to ban beaver trapping on certain public lands, threatening a vital wildlife management tool under the pretext of conservation. This bill could disrupt ecological balance and waterway health, ignoring science for the sake of restrictive ideology. HB 3932 appears to be part of a broader campaign to eliminate beaver trapping in Oregon. Scientifically managed trapping is a proven method for wildlife population management and overall health. Facing restrictions on the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, list enforces a long-term ban without scientific updates. 3932, recently introduced in the Oregon legislature, is the latest attempt at an ongoing effort to outlaw beaver trapping across the state. While anti-trapping groups cheer it as a win for the keystone species, the reality is far less rosy. Scientifically, managed trapping recognized as a key tool in overall wildlife management, ensures beavers thrive without overwhelming ecosystems. The Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife has long balanced trapping with waterway and habitat needs, yet 3932 tosses science based regulated trapping aside in favor of a blanket ban on certain public lands. The bill's reliance on the Department of Environmental Quality list of imperiled waterways is a strong concern. Once a waterway is added to this list, it is nearly impossible to remove it, even if the conditions improve. Fact that critics like Oregon Trappers Association have noted. This reliance on the DEQ list will lock in a de facto permanent ban with no mechanism for updates. Without trapping, resulting beaver overpopulation can clog streams, devastate timber, impact other wildlife species, and increase human wildlife conflict, as documented by the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies after a statewide ban on trapping in Massachusetts. You've heard that story on this program in the past, as we have highlighted the foolishness that occurs in the Bay State. It has occurred in the Bay State and continues to, especially as it concerns trapping. Opponents of the bill, including sportsmen and land managers, argue that it is a solution in search of a problem. Oregon's rejection of a total trapping ban in 2023 showed a preference for science based wildlife management over emotion. Modern trapping, utilizing the best management practices, is humane and effective, and as further detailed by CSF in Trapping the Truth article. Yet 3932 panders to anti trapping sentiment over evidence. Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife, with its strong team of wildlife biologists, is the proper agency for the review and management of beaver trapping across the state. Tying trapping to a list from another department hinders the agency's science-based wildlife management and creates complicated, disjointed rules, potentially causing an imbalance in ecosystem and wildlife management. I don't know what more to add to Marie's article that hasn't been said in the past on this show, especially as it pertains to trapping. What trapping provides state agencies, federal agencies, from its data collection to its cost savings at the state level. You can go to Marie's article in print here on the website, congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. There's a couple in article links, specifically as it occurs to the statewide ban on trapping in Massachusetts and what that historically looks like and the data that is within. Also links you to best management practice, current best management practices, and the scrutiny that goes into that. Um, Massachusetts spends millions of dollars to contract trappers to come into that state or that are already in state to, I mean, beaver mitigation alone, but other trapping issues. I would be curious and probably worth following up Marie here of these waterways. Um, when you start thinking about culverts and infrastructure and these bodies of water that are getting cut off, that will be directly affected by beaver habits. What's the mitigation process for that? What does that look like? What does that cost the taxpayers of Oregon, where you would have had a licensed trapper pay a fee to the state for their trapping license? That would have put gas money into their own truck or car to drive to that trapping site, use their own sweat equity, and provide a service at their cost. Now, if this, you know, 3932 were to continue on and you cut off these waterways, what does that look like for the management of that waterway? And these beavers start piling up and the waterways start backing up for a moment in time. Yeah, it's great. It creates some habitat. We all acknowledge that. But it gets to a point where you reach an apex in that value to that little ecosystem and it becomes a detriment and that ecosystem is wiped out. Too much water, too much flooded timber, people with property starts backing up, you start losing acreage, you become a waterfront property. Some states you're assessed a tax for that. It's no joking matter, and there's nothing to kinda schlep off about as some afterthought. This is a very serious deal. Massachusetts found that out. People that wanted to ban trapping, were directly affected, specifically by beavers, um, backing up waterways and losing acreage and devaluing their property. So, lots to consider here. Beavers are highly prolific. There is a movement afoot to, as Marie, in quotes put here, keystone species. There's a whole beaver preservationist movement going on that is, it's anti-trapping at its core. That's all it is, and it's another clever way to market and package anti-trapping propaganda, to invoke emotion and everything I just said, concerning beaver habitat and what it provides on the landscape, and focusing solely on the front half of that before we get to that apex, and then go down the other side of it, right? To when those beaver bogs are nothing more than giardia infested water pools, not a whole lot living in it, mosquito bogs at all, and the timber is dead, and sure might provide some snags for some from woodpeckers or whatever to eat on, but in large part, those areas are wastelands. They become a wasteland and not as productive as they once were as beaver was setting up shop. Now, these beaver bogs are great. I mean, there's nothing wrong with them as long as it's able to be managed and the habitat's able to be managed. And quite frankly, there's just the wilderness across this country is just too fragmented. I mean, you're just never going to get to a spot where you can say, well, it's just the natural way of things. It's not. It just can't be. There's 335 million people in this country. We all got to live somewhere, and unfortunately, that's encroaching into these traditionally wild spaces. Beavers are pretty good at figuring life out. They're good at what they do. Have running water will work. They will do what they do. What they're programmed to do. And a little small trickling stream that can accommodate a beaver habitat wise and has a place to eat, drink, have shelter, and set up shop pretty quick. Rodents are prolific reproducers. And before long, you have multiple beavers in a single area, all fighting and striving to do what little beavers do. And can quickly get out of hand. So again, no knock on the beaver. It's just science-based management, letting the state agency, the professionals do what they do and listening to them and what they've got going on in Oregon here is certainly problematic. And we will bring you hopefully a positive update of this is kind of not going anywhere. Good news out of Minnesota from Bob Matthews as it concerns crossbows and access. For the continued success of our time honored outdoor traditions, it is critical to secure policies that provide increased access and opportunity for hunters to remain engaged in their outdoor pursuits, regardless of age or injury, as well as offering additional avenues for new hunters to be introduced to the stand or blind, fully including crossbows and archery season. Can do just that. House File 1531 would remove a sunset deadline on the full inclusion of crossbows during the Minnesota archery season. The bill, sponsored by Minnesota Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Representative Josh Heitzman, passed unanimously out of committee last month. CSF worked to pass the original authorization currently at risk of sunsetting in the Natural Resources Omnibus Bill during the 2023 legislative session. As noted last month, Minnesota House Committee on Environment, Natural Resource, Finance, and Policy voted unanimously to approve House File 1531, which would allow crossbows to be fully included in the North Star State's archery hunting season. A trial period for full crossbow inclusion was enacted back in 2023, and House File 1531 stands to remove that sunset deadline that was set during the original passage. Crossbows benefit the sporting conservation community by providing aging archery hunters an opportunity to continue to their favorite pursuit, pursue their favorite species, as a dramatic decrease in archery hunters has been shown to occur as hunters grow older. They also provide hunters that have experience injuries, whether those have long or short term impacts, with an opportunity to continue participating in archery season as they would have originally. Additionally, crossbows serve as an introduction to new methods of take to hunters that have only ever hunted with a firearm. A report from Michigan, this is an article link you can follow, indicates that following the inclusion of crossbows in the state's archery season, about 19% of hunters using crossbows had only previously hunted with a firearm. Archery success improved in Minnesota during its trial period as well. Minnesota DNR had this report. This year was an incredibly successful year for archery hunters, with archery harvest up 16%. Preliminary harvest results suggest that this might be the second highest archery harvest ever in Minnesota, only surpassed by the 2020 season. And we remember that was the coronavirus year and everyone went out in the woods. So certainly those numbers during that time everyone was home might have been a little bit skewed, and certainly participation was up. In 2023, Minnesota legalized crossbows for all archery hunters, regardless of age. Crossbow harvest saw a 28% increase compared to 2023, and a 48% of total archery harvest was by crossbow. Vertical bow harvest was also up 7% compared to 2023. CSF is committed to securing policies that improve access and opportunity for sportsmen and women across the country. And during the legislative session in Minnesota, that has included supporting 1531. CSF will continue to support now that the bill has made it to the House floor, and urge members of the Minnesota Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus to support its passage. Thank you to Bob for his reporting. Wrapping her up here, folks. 2025 retrospective look at the Georgia legislative session as it has come to a close. Efforts to promote and conserve our sporting heritage today stand to benefit sportsmen and women for generations to come, whether that is revolutionizing fisheries management or recruiting the next generation of hunters. Proactive efforts today will last well into the future for all Georgians. So Connor brings us through a little look back here. Much of this we reported on. So this is the update here. Back in February, Georgia Legislative Sportsmen's Caucus co-chair Representative Chas Cannon and Matt Dubnick, among other caucus members, introduced House Bill 451. Sorry, which would have allowed the public schools to offer hunter safety education courses in grades 6 through 12. Also on February 13, Representative Jesse Petra and several other caucus members introduced House Bill 44-3, which would create minor fees for reef and migratory fishing endorsements to help advance saltwater fisheries management in the South Atlantic region. CSF worked very closely alongside caucus members in the Georgia and the Georgia Department of Natural Resources and other partners to advance both pieces of legislating, including submitting written testimony for 451 and 44-3, as well as an action alert for 44-3 that we did cover a couple weeks ago. On the very last day of the 2025 legislative session, language from House Bill 451 was included in Senate Bill 148, which subsequently cleared the House on a 165-0 vote, but was not able to make it back to the Senate to approve the House amendments. House Bill 44-3 cleared the Senate on a 48-5 vote, but the House was not able to vote on approving the Senate changes before adjournment of the General Assembly. So certainly disappointing. Some great opportunities there, but this is as we look to improve and work with our partners in the state houses, some of these are a longer game and don't happen right away. In addition to expanded hunting safety education options, Georgia was also seeking to be a leader in the saltwater fisheries management in the South Atlantic region. Getting back to the action alert. House Bill 44-3 would have been a huge step in the right direction to transform recreational saltwater fishing in Georgia by developing a recreational catch data program. More timely and accurate data can be collected compared to the known unreliable data estimate by the MRIP program. MRIP is a tool used to make rough harvest estimates over 2-month windows, along with a rough estimate of dead discards. Recreational anglers in the South Atlantic region have had their recreational fishing opportunities diminished under MRIP, including the measly one-day red snapper season in federal waters in 2024 that we have covered in the past. I'm not laughing. It's not funny. It's it's ridiculous, quite frankly, is where the small giggle comes from. On the other hand, recreational saltwater anglers in the Gulf are enjoying month-long seasons for red snapper thanks to state-managed data collection programs. Again, that Chris Horton has come on this program numerous times and talked about and lauded. Uh, and just as Connor said, because of those state-managed programs, because they're able to do that the way they do, and trying to model that over on the Atlantic side, uh, Gulf states, they got better fishing, they got more opportunity. Need to start bringing this stuff into the state's control and letting them manage this out. Um, I think that local control has illustrated to be a preferred and more successful model of getting that data and being able to adjust in real time on the ground. And again, you've heard Chris Horton talk about this quite a bit. CSF commends Representatives Cannon and members of the Georgia caucus for their initiative and work on these critical issues. Both House Bill 44-3 and 451 will be eligible again next year as part of the 2-year legislative session in Georgia. So all is not completely lost. And rest assured, Connor will be bringing more back to us when he's got it. That is this week's show, ladies and gentlemen. We thank you for coming along. If you made it this far, as the out says, and normally I do this earlier in the show, but your support listening is awesome. We're glad you're here. The follows, the subscribes, the rates, um, the 5-star rates. You can do that in Apple. You can do that in Spotify. So, as you're hearing me or, you go back and listen to any of the other programs, you can do this in real time. It takes you no time, less than 30 seconds, wherever you're listening to us. iHeart, Spotify, Apple, these are the 3 dominant spaces for podcasts. Anywhere else, whatever it looks like, in that little podcast ecosystem on that app. If there's a subscribe, a follow, whatever it is, please do that. And if you're able to leave a 5-star rating or the equivalent, we ask that you max that out because you're here, you're enjoying it, and we're providing you a whole lot of great information for free. Speaking of free, congressionalsportsman.org, congressionalsportsman.org. You can get the text edition of the Sportsman's Voice every Monday or Tuesday if there's a holiday. Again, I reference the in article links, so many resources, all at your fingertips, guys. Um, you can pull it up on your phone as you're listening along, as long as you're not driving. You got an earbud in and you're sitting in the turkey blind right now or this spring and you're kind of getting caught up on the wonk. Um, you can have us right there in your hand, scrolling up and down the article and linking into those cool trapping links in Marie's article. That's free. And then while you're there, you can sign up for tracking, tracking the capitals, another free service we provide, uh, where you can track certain states, certain pieces of legislation, see how they're going through the legislative process and get yourself involved. So, um, there you have it. That's the news as we see it, as we're reporting for the week of April 7th, 2025. Continue success in the turkey woods and fields, wherever you're at. Shoot straight, be safe, get home. Those of us in the north and other parts, it's coming. Hang in there. Um, I had birds gobbling their heads off the other morning here on my back 40 in New Hampshire. So, I'm ready as well, so we will get there. As always, CSF is your inside connection to outdoor legislation. No feature this week, so go back, check out the other stuff from weeks past if you need to get caught up. We will see you next Wednesday, as always, with the news, and next Thursday with our feature podcast featuring Chris Horton. And holy smokes, man, we start getting into the warmer months here, and we got a great lineup for you. Some turkey camp recaps. We got events coming up from CSF by way of our congressional clays. A whole lot of good stuff forthcoming, and we thank you for hanging with us and tuning in. We'll see you next week. So long. Thanks for joining us on this edition of the Sportsman's Voice podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, your support is crucial, and you can help us out right now by leaving a review, filling in those 5 stars where available, sharing this episode with friends and family, and engaging with us socially. CSF can be found on Facebook, Instagram, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Together, we can protect the outdoor sports we love and continue to keep you informed wherever you are. That's it for this week. Until next time, we'll see you later.